$1.87. That was all. And 60 cents of it was in pennies. Pennies saved 1 and 2 at a time by bargaining with the grocer and the vegetable man and the butcher until her cheeks burned with the silent shame of poverty. 3 times Della counted it. $1.87. And the next day would be Christmas. There was nothing to do but throw herself down on the shabby little couch and cry. So Della did. Life, it seems, is made up of sobs, sniffles, and smiles, but mostly sniffles. While the lady of the house is gradually moving from sniffles to smiles, let's take a look at the home. A furnished apartment at $8 per week. It wasn't exactly too poor to describe, but it was clearly inhabited by people who were not rich. In the hallway below was a letterbox into which no letter would fit, and an electric doorbell that no finger could get to ring. Just above this was a small sign that read, Mr. James Dillingham Young. The Dillingham had looked proud during a former period of prosperity, when the man who owned it was being paid $30 per week. Now, when his income had shrunk to $20, the letters of Dillingham appeared blurred, as if they were thinking seriously of contracting to a modest and unassuming D. But whenever Mr. James Dillingham Young returned home and entered his apartment above, he was greeted as Jim, and hugged tightly by Mrs. James Dillingham Young, already introduced to you as Della. Which is all very good. Della finished her cry and attended to her cheeks with some face powder. She stood by the window and looked out at a gray cat walking a gray fence in a gray backyard. Tomorrow would be Christmas Day, and she had only $1.87 with which to buy Jim a present. She had been saving every penny she could for months. $20 a week doesn't go far. Expenses had been greater than she had anticipated. They always are. Only $1.87 to get a present for Jim. Her Jim. She had spent many happy hours planning for something nice for him. Something fine and rare and high quality, something just a little bit close to being worthy of the honor of being owned by Jim. A small mirror hung between the room's windows. Perhaps you have seen such mirrors hanging in narrow apartments. A very thin and very agile person may, by observing his reflection in a quick series of strips, obtain a fairly accurate picture of his looks. Della, being slender, had mastered the art. Suddenly she whirled from the window and stood before the mirror. Her eyes were shining brilliantly, but in 20 seconds, her face had lost its color. Rapidly she pulled down her hair and let it fall to its full length. The James Dillingham Youngs had 2 possessions in which they took great pride. The first was Jim's gold watch, which had belonged to both his father and grandfather. The other was Della's hair. If the Queen of Sheba had lived in the apartment across the hall, Della would have let her hair hang out the window for a few days to dry, just to cast a shadow on Her Majesty's jewels and gifts. If King Solomon had been the janitor, with all his treasures piled up in the basement, Jim would have pulled out his watch every time he passed, just to see him pull at his beard from envy. So now Della's beautiful hair fell about her, rippling and shining like a waterfall of brown. It reached below her knee and formed almost a dress for her. And then she put it up again nervously and quickly. Once she hesitated for a minute and stood still, while a tear or two splashed on the worn red carpet. She put on her old brown jacket and her old brown hat. With a whirl of skirts and with the brilliant sparkle still in her eyes, she hurried out the door and down the stairs to the street. Where she stopped, the sign read, Madame Sofronie. Hair goods of all kinds. Della ran up the shop steps and then rested a moment, panting. Madame, large, too white and chilly, didn't quite look as though her name could be Sofronie. I buy hair, said Madame. Take your hat off and let me have a look at it. Down came the brown cascade. $20, said Madame, lifting the mass with a practiced hand. Give it to me quick, said Della. Oh, and the next 2 hours tripped by on rosy wings. Forget the mixed metaphor. She was searching through the stores for Jim's present. A pocket watch and chain. She found it at last. It must have been made for Jim and no one else. There was no other like it in any of the stores, and she had turned all of them inside out. It was a platinum watch chain, simple and plain in design, properly demonstrating its value by substance alone rather than flashy decoration as all good things should do. It was even worthy of the watch. As soon as she saw it, she knew that it had to be Jim's. It was like him. Value and quietness both fit the description. $21 they took from her for the chain, and she hurried home with the 87 cents. Even though his watch was grand, Jim sometimes looked at it secretly because of the old leather strap that he used in place of a chain. But with that chain on his watch, Jim might be properly anxious about the time in any company. When Della reached home, her intoxication gave way a little to prudence and reason. She got out her curling iron and turned on the heat and went to work repairing the damage made by generosity added to love. Which is always a tremendous task, dear friends, a mammoth task. 40 minutes later, her head was covered in tiny, close-lying curls, giving her the appearance of a bright schoolboy. She took a long, careful, and critical look at herself in the mirror. If Jim doesn't kill me, she said to herself, before he takes a second look at me, he'll say I look like a theater chorus girl. But what could I do? Oh! What could I do with $1.87? At 7 o'clock, the coffee was made and the frying pan was on the back of the stove, hot and ready to cook the meat. Jim was always on time. Della doubled the watch chain in her hand and sat at the corner of the table near the door that he always entered. Then she heard his step on the stair, down on the first flight, and she turned white for just a moment. She had a habit of saying little silent prayers about the most insignificant of things, and now she prayed quietly, "Please, God, make him think I'm still pretty." Jim walked in and shut the door behind him. He looked thin and very serious. Poor fellow, he was only 22 and to be burdened with that family. He needed a new winter coat, and he was without gloves. Jim stepped inside the door, as still as a hunting dog at the scent of a bird. His eyes were fixed upon Della, and there was an expression in them that she could not read, and it terrified her. It was not anger, nor surprise, nor disapproval, nor horror, nor any of the sentiments that she had been prepared for. He simply stared at her with that peculiar expression on his face. Della wriggled off the table and went to him. "Jim, darling," she cried, "don't look at me that way. I had my hair cut off and sold it because I couldn't have lived through Christmas without giving you a present. I just had to do it. My hair grows awfully fast. Say, Merry Christmas. Jim. You don't know what a beautiful, nice gift I've got for you." "You've cut off your hair?" asked Jim, with difficulty, as if he had not fully arrived at that fact yet, even after the hardest mental struggle. "Cut it off and sold it," said Della. "Don't you like me just as much, anyway? I'm still me without my hair, aren't I?" Jim looked about the room curiously. "You say your hair is gone," he said, almost stupidly. "You needn't look for it," said Della. "It's sold, I tell you, sold and gone, too. It's Christmas Eve, darling. Be good to me, because I did it for you. Maybe the hairs of my head were numbered," she went on with a sudden serious sweetness, "but nobody could ever count my love for you. Shall I put the supper on, Jim?" Out of his trance, Jim seemed quickly to wake. He took his Della in his arms. "For 10 seconds, let us study discreetly some unimportant object in the other direction. $8 a week or $1 million a year, what is the difference? A mathematician or a clever person would give you the wrong answer. The Magi brought valuable gifts, but that was not among them. This cryptic statement will be explained later on. Jim removed a package from his coat pocket and threw it upon the table. "Don't make any mistake, Della," he said, "about me. I don't think there's anything in the way of a haircut or a shave or a shampoo that could make me like my girl any less. But if you'll unwrap that package, you may see why you had me going a while at first." White fingers quickly tore at the string and paper. And then came an ecstatic scream of joy, and then, alas! A quick feminine change to hysterical tears and wails, and the lord of the apartment had to apply all of his comforting powers. For there lay the combs, the set of combs, for the side and the back, that Della had worshipped for so long in a Broadway window. Beautiful combs, pure tortoiseshell, with jeweled rims just the shade to wear in the beautiful, vanished hair. A tortoiseshell hair comb. They were expensive combs, she knew, and her heart had simply longed for them without any hope of ever possessing them. And now, they were hers. But the hair that would have suited the desired ornaments was gone. But she hugged them to her chest, and after a while she was able to look up with dim eyes and a smile and say, "My hair grows so fast, Jim." And then Della leaped up like a little startled cat and cried, "Oh, oh." Jim had not yet seen his beautiful present. She held it out to him eagerly upon her open palm. The precious metal seemed to flash with a reflection of her bright and loving spirit. "Isn't it beautiful, Jim? I hunted all over town to find it. You'll have to look at the time 100 times a day now. Give me your watch. I want to see how it looks on it." Instead of obeying, Jim tumbled down on the couch and put his hands under the back of his head and smiled. "Dell," said he, "let's put our Christmas presents away and keep them a while. They're too nice to use right away. I sold the watch to get the money to buy your combs. And now why don't you put the supper on?" The Magi, as you know, were wise men, wonderfully wise men who brought gifts to the babe in the manger. They invented the art of giving Christmas presents. Being wise, their gifts were no doubt wise ones, perhaps even being exchangeable if someone else had brought the same thing. And here I have told to you the simple story of two foolish young people in a shabby apartment who most unwisely sacrificed for each other the greatest treasures of their house. But in a last word to the wise of these days, let it be said that of all who give gifts, these two were the wisest. Of all who give and receive gifts, people such as they are the wisest. Everywhere, they are the wisest. They are the Magi,